Hello. In this video, I'm going to go over a high-level controls process. This is not going to be an in-depth look at how to do everything in controls. This is going to be more of a high-level things you can do quickly, things mechanical engineers can use to get prices or help with some of the controls costs. We don't always have to go to a controls engineer. So let's get started. So I drew an example system on the screen. There's no rhyme or reason to it. It's just something that I whipped up real quick to use in it as an example. So in Maestro, let's say I was done modeling this and it was time for a controls engineer to come in and work on this. This would be the stage that this would all happen in. So down here, there's this red and yellow button you can click on, which brings up the controls tab, which has a lot of stuff in it. Controls is a little bit more complex in terms of how it works with Maestro, because there'll be times where you add in like an e-stop or a power supply and your cost doesn't automatically change. The things that are consistently being worked on in the background that may not be implemented yet, but controls is a big package that is evolving in Maestro as it becomes more and more useful. So the big thing to note in controls is that everything is working off of a data set. So if you can imagine a Excel sheet with all of the controls parts that we currently have saved onto the network, and then Maestro is going to that Excel sheet and looking up parts and importing them in. That is what Maestro is considering a data set. It is a large file of basically parts that it's reading from. So the very first thing a controls engineer would need to do is come into here, this add and edit parts, and click on it. And once you do that, it brings up this dataset editor. So if you notice in the devices tab, all these things are loaded into Maestro. This is that Excel file that I'm saying. It could be an Excel file, it could be something else, but it's the information that's being imported into Maestro. So what you'd want to do is you'd want to come over to users. And there's this button here that says claim dataset ownership. So controls engineer will come in here and claim that dataset. That means that they are responsible for doing the controls on this project, and nobody can go in there and change the controls without being an added user for access, or the person himself can go do that. That stops anybody from coming in here and modifying the controls. So if you notice, I already claimed it, and now my name shows up here. And if I know there's going to be somebody else who needs to do this, as you can see down here, I'm the dataset owner. So I could add a user, and I can tell them what they're allowed to edit and not edit. So it kind of locks your controls down. It's just for revision management and things of that nature. So if you come over to your parts tab, I use this one quite often. So let's say we're looking for a power supply for MDR. So I can come in here and type in power supply, hit enter, and if you see here, it filters to the power supplies. Boom, MDR dual power supply. I come over to the right, and I can see, oh, it's $871 for a power supply. So I know if I'm putting in MDR, I'm going to need a power supply. I can just come in here and look and see how much power supply is and add that to my cost. This pulls from SAP, so if you're claimed a data set, it's not going to keep updating. So if there is a change in price, you just click this Get Updated Costs, and it should update. Part modeling, you can come in here, and you can put custom parts in here, things that we might not have in your data set, or you get a quote from a vendor on a scanner and you want to add it into here. That's where you would do it at. So it's not, part modeling isn't necessarily modeling a 3D depiction. It's more of that, putting that Excel file per se into the system. So once you get your data set complete, it's going to ask if you want to update. So you hit yes, and you hit OK. So there's this data set report, which you could click on, and that's going to export everything in your data set, not in your model, but everything that the system has in its report into an Excel file. So you'll be able to click that and see everything that makes up the data set that you're currently working in. This button down here is pretty neat. I use this one quite often. If you click it, controls device report. What this is going to do is it's going to look at my model that I have here. So I want to select all, create export, And this is going to give me a total that's currently modeled for some devices. So you can see there's 3 motors in here, 1 power supply. Total device quantity would be 5. So it's just a quick way to get totals for your devices that you need. Then you have your power report, which you can click on your power report, and based on what's here, it can tell you, how many 1-phase or 3-phase that you need to get, and you can export those into Excel. And then there's a lot of things in here that we won't be using at the moment. That'll go into the next one. I mean, there's a cable schedule, so depending on how much you put into this is how much you're going to get out. So if you go ahead and drew in all the cables or wiring, you could go ahead and export your cable schedule, and it'll tell you lengths of a certain wire that you're using or cable and all that stuff. Again, it just comes down to how much you put in is how much you're going to get out. So most of the time with the controls, you're going to be working in 2D view, which would be here. So if you scroll through here, you'll see a lot of controls devices. A lot of these things are in just their categories. It's a matter of just learning them and figuring out where they're at. But from here, this is where it comes into play, where it's all about doing how accurate this is going to be in a drawing, not necessarily the cost. So if you notice, we have this e-stop here. So if I bring this in and I put an e-stop here and I drag it, to make it bigger, so this is telling me that there's not a number assigned with it, which is fine because we'll get into that. And we want to turn that off. There we go. So now you can adjust the length of this thing when you place it. It doesn't have to be that little short. So up here, I'll just replace this. Click and hold, and then you can drag these as far as you want. When you're doing this, I'm going to move it out of the way real quick. So if you notice, the price did not change, right? Because this is not going to be included into your cost. So this would have to be added separately in your cost. So again, things that are not necessarily in Maestro yet. I'm assuming in the future there will be an option to automatically add this based on the size of it. And then if you see here, you can add some stuff to it, dual direction, or it could be mechanically included. And then we're going to go ahead and delete that guy out. So very similar thing for EECs, DMCs, beacons. For example, we'll throw a beacon in here. If you notice, cost doesn't change, but it's there, right? From controls, you can change the colors of it and stuff. And the purpose of this is that when we go ahead and do make a drawing, you can actually filter off the mechanical stuff on the drawing. So you can hide a lot of the things and then just show controls. Scanner, same thing. You can say, okay, I'm going to put a scanner right there. Now, in 3D mode, scanner shows up like this. Beacon shows up. So in the 3D mode, those types of things do show up. They're just not included in the cost. But it does help when you're starting to work on these things. And if we can go down here, now you see the automatic cables. This is when you have to get used to these types of things, because if you try to draw a cable in, for example, you kind of want to know which. I mean, I'm not a controls expert, so I wouldn't know where the cabling goes. But this is when that cable report would come in handy, because it would tell you how long this is, what type of product it is. Again, the more you put in, the more you're going to get out. Down in the controls panel, we have like a flex sort. You can throw that in there. If you notice, again, cost does not change. So that would have to be added into your workbook. It won't be automatically calculated into Maestro. And we can keep scrolling down here and just see what other types of stuff we have. Crossbelt sort of stuff, goods to person. So again, there's a lot of predefined symbols and stuff in here that we would use in a 2D mode. Again, and not necessarily wouldn't be included in price yet, but it does. You can basically do your entire controls drawing in this view, and then when we go ahead later and actually start our drawings, they'll show up there. And again, they also show up in 3D mode. So if you open up an Amazon, you'll see a lot of control stuff in there. And it really helps with the cabinets. So a lot of times when we're doing mods, we need to know where the cabinets are. And if you open up like an Amazon, since the controls team, modeled everything in there, you can say, okay, oh, the nearest controls cabinet is over here. And then they'll be labeled with your sequence numbers and all that stuff. So it helps. It drastically helps when you have a complete package. And then again, the more stuff you add, the more information you'll get out of your controls device report. You can do a update auto controls on selection. So basically, when you click it, it updates it. I haven't really used too much of the functional based design, so I don't have a lot of input on that one. But yeah, I mean this is kind of the controls basics, and the more you use it, the more you get accustomed to it. I mean, I use the parts lookup more than anything else, coming into parts and see how much things cost. It's a lot quicker to do it this way than try to search in SAP for it. The other thing that is being worked on is if you click this down arrow right here, it says import from PMC. It'll give you different data sets based on customers. So if you notice, there's a North American Amazon standard. So some of the standard equipment that we use for Amazon is different than our standard products. So you'd come in here and you would click on, okay, I'm working on Amazon, and then you'd load that data set. Or, this is the standard one that's always on. So you would load that data set. And it just gives you different options for parts. But that's the high-level controls overview. I'll go in more depth in future episodes. But yeah, I mean, if you have any questions, as always, reach out. And hopefully these videos are helping. All right, see you in the next video.